Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to gardening in Cold Spring Harbor. So today in Long Island, New York, zone 7A is a very cloudy, rainy day. I had so much planned for today. I wanted to get out there and plant some of my blueberry bushes from bare roots, but because of the heavy rain, I wasn't able to do so. So instead, I wanted to invite you indoors to my green room and to talk to you guys about orchids. Yes, I love orchids. I have orchids. I grow orchids. And I wanted to talk to you all about some of the most popular orchid varieties, how to grow them, where to plant them, how to plant them, how to transplant them, what soil mix is best to use when planting your orchids, and also when and how to fertilize your orchids to achieve maximum growing success. So come with me today and let's talk all about our orchids. Hey guys, welcome back to gardening in Cold Spring Harbor. And again, welcome back to my green room. As I said before, today is a very windy, rainy, cloudy day, as you could probably see behind me. So I was not able to do much gardening, much planting outside. So I decided to welcome you guys indoors and to talk to you about one of my favorite indoor flowers, which is the orchid. So the orchid family is one of the largest in the flowering world realm, with over more than 25,000 different species of orchids out there. Orchids grow everywhere and anywhere on every single continent of this world except for Antarctica. The greatest concentration of orchids are found in Asia, also in South and Central America. So if you live in North America like I do, orchids have to be grown and should be grown indoors. So orchids are classified as terrestrial or epiphytic orchids. So when talking about epiphytic orchids, you're talking about their air-growing orchids. And if you are talking about the terrestrial orchids, you are referring to the earth-growing orchid plants. So most of your orchids are in fact epiphytic, which means that when growing in the nature where they used to be grown, they grow mainly on trees and or bark. So when growing on trees, epiphytic orchids draw majority of their moisture from natural rain and or mist in the air. So let's now talk about some of the potting tips when it comes to your orchid. So when purchasing an orchid in your local nursery, a garden center, or even in your supermarket, when you bring it home with those gorgeous large flower blooms, I know that some of us are tempted to place it into a larger, prettier, better looking pot. So that is the first no-no when planting or replanting your orchid. If you decide to replant your orchid while it is still in the peak of its bloom, you are risking damaging or killing some or all of its blooms. So I highly recommend that you wait until your orchid is fully done blooming, until you repot your orchid into a larger and or prettier pot. So the next helpful repotting / potting tip for when growing your orchids is always get rid of that orchid potting medium that originally came in the pot in which you purchased your orchids. You never know how old that orchid mix is, how much water was applied to it. Maybe there are insects growing in it, so you never know. Always try to pot your orchid in fresh, brand new orchid potting mix. So here comes the next tip. Never ever plant an orchid in a regular potting soil mix. Orchids are not meant to be planted in regular and or organic soil. You always have to plant your orchids in special orchid potting mix. It is a coarse blend formulated specifically for growing and replanting orchid plants. So all of the orchids, especially your epiphytic variety of orchids, love airflow going through their root system. It helps them grow stronger, larger, and produce bigger, brighter blooms. Also, your orchid potting mix, it's very light, it is porous, and it drains out the water relatively quickly, which is exactly what your orchid plant wants and loves. So the orchid potting mix, you guys, some of you might ask, what is so special about it? Why should I be paying for it and planting my orchid in that specific potting mix? Well, the orchid potting mix is made primarily of medium to large chunks of bark. It is almost always mixed with perlite, moss, and also charcoal, which is essential and ideal for growing orchids. So when growing your orchid plants indoors, orchid flowers or plants prefer to be grown in terracotta pots. This is an example of one. Why? Because the material that these pots are made from allows for that extra air circulation to the orchid roots, which makes the growing process ideal for when growing these plants indoors. So the next helpful tip or advice when it comes to orchids is what kind of a pot should you choose when planting and or replanting your orchid plants. So what material should your pot be made from, and how large of a pot should you choose? So as I said previously, terracotta is an ideal material for planting and or replanting your orchid, as this texture, this material will allow extra air to your orchid roots, extra air to circulate around your orchid roots. Okay, again now, think about drainage. You definitely want to choose a pot with a decent size drainage hole on the bottom. If you choose a plastic pot and you're able to create your own drainage holes, then you should definitely do so. You can use a knife or even a hot, warmed up nail, a metal nail piece. You can heat it up on a stove and you can use it to puncture through your plastic flower pot and create those drainage holes. Also, when choosing and thinking of the size of the pot, think about your plant's root system. You should allow at least an inch of extra space for your orchid's roots to grow and to expand. So when looking at your orchid plant, how can you tell, one, if your orchid plant is healthy, and two, if you are watering your orchid just enough? Well, the first thing you always have to look at is the color of your orchid's leaves. Are the leaves bright green? Are they dark green? Or are they brown/reddish color? So the color of the leaves will tell you quite a lot about the health of your orchid plant. So if your orchid's leaves are a bright green color like so, this simply means that your orchid plant is healthy and absolutely happy. If your orchid's leaf color is darker or very, very dark green color, that means you are not watering your orchid enough and it is crying for help. It is asking you, please, please water me. And if your orchid's leaves are anywhere in the brown pigmentation spectrum or have tints of red, that means the opposite. That means that you have been overwatering your orchid and the roots are in the stage of rotting. And you need to rescue your plant as soon as possible. So another very important and very helpful tip when it comes to orchids, especially watering orchids. I know that I personally myself, when shopping for my orchid plants, I have seen a very large tag or sticker on the orchid plant in the store that says, simply water me by adding an ice cube a week. That is a no, 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 you guys. Absolutely not. Never, ever water your orchid plant using ice cubes. Orchid is a tropical plant found growing typically again in nature, and it does not like nor does it appreciate being shocked by ice cold water drops. Imagine you're standing out there and somebody drops a bucket of ice cubes on your head. I'm sure you wouldn't appreciate that either. It prefers warmer climate and does not like to be shocked with cold temperature water. So here is another very helpful tip on knowing whether or not you are keeping your orchid healthy and if you're giving it enough water. Simply look at your plant's roots. So almost always when you buy an orchid, whether it's at your garden center or nursery or in your local supermarket, almost always they come in a clear container like this one. So all you have to do is simply look at the roots. If the roots look plump and white-ish color, that means your plant is healthy, happy, and you're giving it plenty of water. If the roots, again, look shriveled and gray in color, that means you are underwatering your orchid and you need to start watering it more frequently. If your roots are shriveled and have any pigment of brown, black, or red in it, that means you are experiencing a root rot, most always from over watering your orchid plant. So when watering your orchid plant, always make sure that when you're applying the water, you apply it directly either to your orchid mix, which is over here, or to the roots. Try not to apply or pour any water on top. This is called the crown, this smaller leaf on top. And if the water gets into this crown, pockets in there and collects in there, this will cause the leaves to brown, rot, and die out. So be very careful when you're watering your orchid. Again, make sure the water goes directly into the orchid potting mix and or the root and does not pull in or collect in this smaller leaf on top, which is also called the crown. If it gets in there, use a paper towel or a kitchen towel and simply dry this tip, the crown up, leaving almost no water there at all, preventing the rot. So how often do you have to water your orchid plant? Simply water it once a week in the winter and water it twice a week in the warmer season months. So the orchid plants that you almost always see in your local garden centers, the nurseries, and or your local supermarket, that variety of orchids is Phalaenopsis orchids. And how often do these orchids bloom? They bloom almost every few months. So this variety, the Phalaenopsis, the one you would buy at your local supermarket per se, should bloom when grown accordingly and properly, should bloom for you every few months. Other varieties of orchids bloom once or twice per year. So last but definitely not least, you guys, fertilizer. How, when, and what kind of fertilizer to use when it comes to orchids. So when your orchid is in its peak season, spring/summer, when it's growing, producing blooms, make sure you fertilize your plant at least once every 2 weeks. And when your plant is in its dormancy phase, so that's usually in the fall and or winter, you only need to fertilize once a month. Again, do not use just any fertilizer that you have in your garden cabinets or in your shed or in your garage. Make sure that you purchase and that you have a fertilizer specifically made and formulated for growing orchids. So this is an example. I got this at Home Depot. It's by Miracle Grow. So it's an orchid plant food mist. It is ready to use. It is specifically for orchids. And again, there are always instructions in the back. It will tell you exactly how much to apply, when and where to apply this mist so that you don't damage and or burn your orchid plant or its roots. So again, you cannot just use any fertilizer, whether it's organic or not. You must have special orchid formulated fertilizer on hand if you're trying to fertilize your orchid plants. So this is it for this video, you guys. Again, thank you for joining me today on this rainy, cloudy day here in Long Island, New York, Zone 7A. Thank you for watching me. Thank you for letting me give you these helpful tips and advice on growing and repotting your home orchid plants. If you liked this video, please don't forget to click thumb up. I really like to see that you guys enjoy watching my videos. Please leave your comments. I love reading your comments, and I will make sure that I will respond to each and every one of you. And of course, subscribe to my channel, Gardening in Cold Spring Harbor. I cannot wait to make and release more videos for you guys. And if you subscribe, you will not miss any of my new upcoming videos. Again, I hope everyone is doing well, everyone is safe, healthy, and happy. Thank you for watching me today. Be well, and I'll see you in the next upcoming episodes in Gardening in Cold Spring Harbor. Bye, guys.